What happens when a species that was supposed to be extinct shows up to a galactic war with technology that shouldn't exist? The Terran Federation had been wiped out 3 centuries ago. Every civilized race knew this. Their homeworld was a dead rock, their colonies abandoned, their people scattered to the cosmic winds. So when the greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin, when 7 allied fleets prepared to make their final desperate stand against the unstoppable Vorthan Empire, no one expected salvation to come from ghosts. But sometimes the dead refuse to stay buried. And sometimes they bring friends. The silence that swept across the battlefield that day wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the presence of something far more terrifying. Hope. Admiral Kexthera felt the weight of 7 species hopes pressing down on her 4 shoulders as she stared at the tactical display. The hologram showed what everyone already knew would be their last battle. 12,000 ships from the Vorthan Empire hung in space like a metallic storm cloud, their hulls gleaming with the dark energy that had conquered half the galaxy in just 50 years. Against them, the Grand Alliance had managed to scrape together barely 3,000 vessels. Ships from the proud Zelanti Confederacy with their crystal hulls that sang when they fired. Swift Korthak raiders that moved like silver fish through the void. The massive dreadnoughts of the Thexmor Republic, each one a floating city bristling with weapons. Even the mysterious ethereal collective had sent their ghostly ships that seemed to exist half in normal space and half in dimensions no one understood. It wasn't enough. Everyone knew it wasn't enough. Admiral, came the soft voice of Commander Vashti, her aide and the closest thing she had to a friend in this mess. The final fleet positions are confirmed. We have approximately 47 minutes before the Vorthans begin their assault. Kexthera's primary eyes remained fixed on the display while her secondary ones glanced at the young Zelanti officer. 300 cycles old, barely an adult by their standards, and already commanding a heavy cruiser. The war had aged them all, promoted them all beyond their years and experience. Have all ships been briefed on the Kyrian maneuver, she asked, referring to their desperate last-ditch strategy. Named after the Thexmor tactical genius who had developed it, the plan involved using their faster ships to punch through the enemy formation while the heavies provided covering fire. It had worked exactly once, in a much smaller engagement, and had cost them 30% casualties even in victory. Yes, Admiral. Though I should mention that Captain Mordak of the Thexmor contingent has expressed concerns about the feasibility. Kexthera's mouthparts clicked in what passed for bitter amusement among her people. Captain Mordak was one of the finest tactical minds in the galaxy, and if he had concerns, they were probably justified. But what choice did they have? The Vorthans had backed them into this star system, their last stronghold before the route to the core worlds lay open. There would be no retreat, no regrouping, no miraculous reinforcements arriving at the last moment. Tell Captain Mordak that his concerns are noted and that he should prepare his ships anyway. We fight with what we have, not what we wish we had. The bridge around her hummed with nervous energy. Officers from 7 different species worked side by side at stations designed by committees to accommodate everyone and satisfy no one. The air recycling systems struggled to balance the atmospheric preferences of beings who had evolved on completely different worlds. It was a miracle they could work together at all, but desperation had a way of fostering cooperation. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Vorthan flagship, announced Lieutenant Kolshan from the communications station. On screen. The main viewer shimmered and resolved into the image of Supreme War Master Gexval, the Vorthan commander whose fleets had brought ruin to countless worlds. His species looked vaguely reptilian to most humanoids, though they had long ago transcended mere biology with technological enhancements that made them living weapons. Gexbal's face was a patchwork of organic flesh and gleaming metal, his eyes replaced by sensors that could perceive across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Admiral Kexthera of the Failing Alliance, his voice carried the electronic distortion common to Vorthan enhancement. I extend one final opportunity for surrender. Submit to the Empire, and your species will be granted slave status rather than extinction. Your ships may depart peacefully to spread word of Vorthan mercy to your home worlds. The bridge fell silent. Kexthera could feel every eye upon her, waiting for her response. She had been chosen to lead this desperate alliance not because she was the best admiral among them, but because she was the only one all 7 species could agree to follow. Her own people, the Korthak, were renowned for their pragmatism and their ability to find common ground even among bitter enemies. "War Master," she replied, her voice carrying clearly across the calm channel. "Your offer is most generous. However, I'm afraid we must decline. You see, we've grown rather attached to our freedom, and slavery has never been particularly fashionable among our peoples." Gexval's metallic features shifted in what might have been amusement. "Your spirit is admirable, Admiral, if futile. Very well. You have chosen extinction. My fleets will begin their advance in 30 minutes. Use that time to make peace with whatever gods your inferior species worship." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. "Well," Vashti said quietly, "at least we know where we stand." "Indeed." Kexthera turned back to the tactical display. The Vorthan fleet was already beginning to move, their ships falling into the precise attack formations that had proven so devastatingly effective throughout their campaign of conquest. Each formation was a work of deadly art, positioned to maximize firepower while minimizing their own exposure. "All ships, this is Admiral Kexthera," she announced over the fleet-wide channel. "In 25 minutes, we will engage the enemy. I won't lie to you about our chances. We are outnumbered 4-1 by an enemy that has never known defeat. By any reasonable calculation, we should surrender or flee." She paused, letting her words sink in across thousands of ships. "But, we are not here because we are reasonable. We are here because sometimes, the impossible must be attempted. Because sometimes, the few must stand for the many. Because sometimes, even in the face of certain defeat, we choose to fight rather than kneel." Across the fleet, on bridges of crystal and metal and stranger materials, officers and crew members of 7 species listened to words that might be the last they ever heard from their commander. "Today, we write the final chapter of this war. Let it not be said that we went gentle into that dark night. Let the universe remember that when the Empire came to snuff out the light of freedom, we stood in their path and made them fight for every star, every world, every life. Today, we are not Korthak or Zalanti or Thexmor. Today, we are the Grand Alliance, and we will show these conquerors what that truly means." The channel closed to a cacophony of responses from across the fleet. Battle cries in 7 languages, weapons powering up, engines burning bright as ships moved into final positions. If they were going to die, they would die as they had lived, free and fighting. 15 minutes to engagement, Vashti reported. Kexthera nodded and activated her command interface. The tactical display expanded to show detailed information on every ship in both fleets. Her fingers danced across holographic controls, making minute adjustments to formation and timing. Every ship captain worth their rank was doing the same thing right now, checking and double-checking their plans, their weapons, their crew assignments. The Vorthans continued their methodical advance, their formation perfect and terrifying in its precision. No wasted motion, no unnecessary risks. They would arrive at optimal firing range, unleash devastating barrages, and systematically destroy the Alliance fleet with minimal losses to themselves. It was textbook Imperial strategy, proven effective against dozens of other coalitions and confederations. 10 minutes to engagement. On the sensor displays, individual Vorthan ships began to resolve in greater detail. Their hulls were the color of dried blood, organic-looking despite being constructed from advanced alloys. Each ship seemed to pulse with its own internal life, as if the vessels themselves were living creatures bred for war. In a sense, they were. Vorthan biotechnology was among the most advanced in the galaxy. "Admiral," came a new voice from the sensor station. "I'm detecting an anomaly." Kexthera's attention snapped to Lieutenant Yextar, a young Thexmor whose people had the most sophisticated sensor technology in the Alliance. "What kind of anomaly?" "Unknown, Admiral. There's something distorting space approximately 50,000 kilometers beyond the Vorthan formation. It's not showing up on standard scans, but our gravitational sensors are detecting mass where there shouldn't be any." "Could it be a Vorthan stealth ship? Some new technology we haven't seen before?" Yextar's heavy features creased in concentration as he worked his controls. "Negative, Admiral. The mass distribution is all wrong for a ship. It's enormous. Whatever it is, it's at least 10 times larger than a Vorthan dreadnought. a chill ran down Kexthera's spine. The last thing they needed was some new Vorthan superweapon arriving to make their impossible situation even worse. Are you certain about these readings? Yes, Admiral. And there's something else. The distortion is moving. Slowly, but it's definitely approaching our position. 5 minutes to engagement, Vashti announced, but her voice carried new uncertainty. Kexthera stared at the sensor data, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The gravitational anomaly was moving on a course that would bring it into the battle zone just as the main engagement began. Coincidence? Or something more deliberate? Can you get a visual on whatever's causing the distortion? I'm trying, Admiral, but there's some kind of interference. Almost like something is actively jamming our sensors. The tactical situation was deteriorating by the second. Not only were they facing impossible odds against the Vorthan fleet, but now there was some unknown factor entering the equation. Another enemy? A natural phenomenon? Some kind of trap? Admiral, the Vorthans are hailing us again, Kolshan reported. Put them through. Gexbal's image reappeared, but this time his enhanced features showed what might have been confusion. Admiral, are you detecting the gravitational anomaly beyond our formation? The fact that even the Vorthans were confused was not reassuring. We are, War Master. I don't suppose you'd care to enlighten us? This is not Imperial technology. Our sensors cannot penetrate whatever is causing the distortion. If this is some desperate alliance stratagem, it's not, Kexthera interrupted. We're as puzzled as you are. For a moment, the two enemies stared at each other across the calm channel, united in their bewilderment. Then, Gexbal's expression hardened again. No matter. Whatever this anomaly represents, it changes nothing. In 2 minutes, my fleets will engage yours. Deal with your mystery as you see fit, but do not expect it to save you. The transmission ended again. 1 minute to engagement, Vashti called out. Across the fleet, final preparations were being completed. Weapons were charging to full power, shields were raised to maximum strength, and damage control teams were standing by. In 1 minute, the largest space battle in galactic history would begin, and most of the beings preparing for it knew they would not live to see its end. 30 seconds. Kexthera gripped the arms of her command chair and watched the tactical display. The Vorthan ships were sliding into attack position with the precision of a well-rehearsed dance. Any moment now, the first salvos would light up the darkness of space. 10 seconds. 5. Admiral. Lieutenant Yextar's voice cracked with excitement and disbelief. The anomaly. It's decloaking. On the main viewer, space itself seemed to ripple and tear. Reality bent like heated metal, revealing something that had been hiding behind layers of distorted spacetime. What emerged was impossible, magnificent, and terrifying all at once. A ship. But not just any ship. This vessel was enormous beyond comprehension, its hull stretching for dozens of kilometers in every direction. Its design was unlike anything in the known galaxy, sleek and organic in some places, brutally industrial in others, as if it had been built by multiple civilizations working together across centuries. Strange energies danced along its hull, and weapon ports that could have swallowed smaller vessels dotted its surface like the eyes of some cosmic predator. But it was the symbols painted on its hull that made Kexthera's blood freeze in her veins. Ancient text in a language that had been dead for 300 years. Text that every schoolchild in the galaxy learned about in history classes. Terran Federation. That's impossible, Vashti whispered, voicing what everyone on the bridge was thinking. The humans have been extinct for centuries. Earth is a dead world. We all know this. On the sensor displays, smaller contacts were separating from the massive vessel. Hundreds of them. Ships that registered as Terran design but built with technology that seemed decades or even centuries ahead of anything the humans had possessed during their brief time on the galactic stage. The impossible fleet hung in space like a promise of salvation, its presence changing everything about the tactical situation. And then, cutting through the static and confusion of the moment, came a transmission on frequencies that hadn't been used since the fall of the Terran Federation. This is Admiral Sarachen of the Terran Federation ship Horizon's End, flagship of the Seoul Expeditionary Fleet. The voice was calm, professional, and undeniably human. "We have been monitoring this engagement. To the ships of the Grand Alliance, maintain your positions and prepare to coordinate a joint assault. To the Vorthan Empire, you have 30 seconds to begin withdrawing from this system before we open fire." Silence swept the battlefield like a tide. Then, Gexval's voice, thick with disbelief and growing anger, "Impossible. The humans are extinct. This is some elaborate deception." The response came immediately, and, when it did, it carried the weight of 3 centuries of exile, preparation, and burning desire for justice. "Supreme War Master Gexval of the Vorthan Empire, this is Admiral Chen. Your people may have forgotten us, but we have never forgotten you. Humanity is very much alive, and we've been waiting a very long time for this conversation. Your 30 seconds are now 25 and counting." In the depths of space, the weapons of the impossible fleet began to glow with energies that made the stars themselves seem dim by comparison. 24 hours earlier, aboard the TFS Horizon's End, Admiral Sarah Chen had been reviewing the same intelligence reports that kept her awake at night. 3 centuries of exile had given humanity time to perfect many things: advanced technology, tactical doctrine, and the art of patience. But, watching other species suffer under Vorthan oppression while they prepared for this moment had tested even human endurance. "Admiral, we're receiving the final confirmation from the monitoring stations," reported Captain Marcus Webb, her chief of staff. The monitoring stations were hidden throughout the galaxy, tiny, automated sensors that had tracked Vorthan movements and alliance preparations for decades. "The Grand Alliance fleet is moving into position at Kepler 442. This is it." Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving the holographic display that showed the disposition of both fleets. After 300 years of planning, watching, and preparing, the moment had finally arrived. The Vorthan Empire, drunk on its own success and convinced of its superiority, was about to learn why humanity had vanished from the galactic stage so completely that even their enemies believed them extinct. The truth was far more complex and far more dangerous than anyone realized. "Status report on the fleet," she requested. "All ships report ready for combat operations," Webb replied. "The Ascension is standing by with her reality manipulation arrays. The Vindication has her temporal displacement cannons fully charged. The newer ships from the Proxima yards are running perfectly, their hybrid biomechanical systems are responding even better than projected." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Grand Alliance fought with technology that was advanced for its time but still recognizable: energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, defensive shields based on known physics. The Vorthan Empire had pushed those technologies to their absolute limits, creating ships that were terrifying in their efficiency. Humanity had taken a different path. When the Vorthan Empire had first appeared on the galactic scene 3 centuries ago, they had targeted humanity with ruthless efficiency. Not because humans were particularly threatening, but because Earth sat on a strategic hyperlane junction that the Empire needed to control. The war had been brief and seemingly decisive. Human colonies were glassed, Earth's cities burned, and the Terran Federation's fleet was scattered to the cosmic winds. What the Vorthans hadn't known was that humanity's greatest strength had never been their military might. It was their absolute, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. While the Empire celebrated its victory and moved on to other conquests, the scattered survivors of humanity had done something unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of trying to rebuild what they had lost, they had hidden. Not in remote star systems or forgotten colonies, but in dimensions parallel to normal space, in pockets of reality that existed between the gaps in known physics. 300 years in exile had given them time to study, to learn, to evolve. They had encountered things in those hidden dimensions that changed their understanding of existence itself. Technologies that seemed like magic. Beings that existed as pure energy or thought. Concepts that couldn't be explained in any language that still used words. And they had learned. Oh, how they had learned. "Signal the fleet," Sarah commanded. "Begin final approach to the insertion point. All ships are to maintain dimensional phase variance until we reach optimal engagement range." Around them, space itself began to bend and twist as the Seoul Expeditionary Fleet moved through layers of reality that shouldn't exist. To outside observers, they were invisible, undetectable, nothing more than slight gravitational anomalies that could be easily dismissed as sensor errors. But they were there, and they were watching. The horizon's end itself was a marvel that defied conventional understanding of engineering. Its hull was constructed from metamaterials that existed in 12 dimensions simultaneously, making it effectively indestructible by conventional weapons. Its engines didn't burn fuel, they manipulated the fundamental forces that held reality together, allowing speeds that made faster-than-light travel look like a leisurely stroll. Its weapons were even more impressive. Humanity had learned to weaponize concepts that other species couldn't even comprehend. They could fire condensed gravity, accelerated time, crystallized space, and things that didn't have names in any known language. "Admiral," reported Commander Lisa Park from the sensor station, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from both fleets. The engagement is about to begin." Sarah watched the tactical display as thousands of ships prepared for battle. The Grand Alliance had fought bravely throughout this war, but they were fighting with honor and desperation against an enemy that understood only efficiency and dominance. Without intervention, this would be a massacre. Are our allies prepared for revelation? The Psychological Warfare Department has been monitoring Alliance communications for months, Webb confirmed. They're ready for us. The appearance of extinct humanity should provide significant morale advantages to Alliance forces while potentially disrupting Vorthan command cohesion. And the Vorthans? Intelligence suggests they'll initially assume we're using some kind of advanced holographic deception. By the time they realize we're genuine, it should be too late for them to adapt their tactics. Sarah nodded. Psychological warfare had been another area where humanity had excelled during their exile. When you existed in dimensions where thought could become reality, you learned very quickly how powerful belief could be. Signal all ships, begin emergence sequence. Target the Vorthan command structure for initial demonstration. I want War Master Gexball to understand exactly what he's facing before we proceed with full engagement. Across the hidden fleet, reality began to ripple and Terra's massive ships forced themselves back into normal space. The process was visible to any sensor operator who knew what to look for. Space itself bending and distorting as vessels that had been existing in parallel dimensions suddenly imposed their presence on baseline reality. Emergence complete, Admiral. All ships report successful translation to normal space. The cloaking fields are holding, but gravitational distortion is becoming detectable. Maintain concealment for another 60 seconds, then begin the revelation. I want to give the Alliance time to see us before the Vorthans do. Those 60 seconds stretched like hours. On the display, Sarah watched as the Vorthan fleet moved into attack position with mechanical precision. Every ship exactly where it should be, every formation optimized for maximum destructive efficiency. They had done this hundreds of times before against dozens of different species, and they had never lost. Pride. That would be their weakness. Admiral, the Vorthans are hailing the Alliance fleet. Final surrender demand, by the sound of it. Expected. Begin decloak sequence on my mark. All ships are to reveal simultaneously for maximum psychological impact. She watched the countdown on her display. The Vorthan ultimatum was being delivered with typical Imperial arrogance. In a few moments, the largest space battle in galactic history would begin, and the Vorthan Empire would discover that the galaxy still held surprises. Mark. Space twisted, reality bent, and the impossible became visible. The Sol Expeditionary Fleet emerged from dimensional hiding like avenging angels, their hulls gleaming with energies that shouldn't exist. The horizon's end led them, her massive bulk dwarfing even the largest Vorthan dreadnoughts. The effect on both fleets was immediate and dramatic. Alliance communications channels erupted in exclamations of disbelief, hope, and desperate joy. Vorthan formations wavered as individual ship commanders struggled to process what their sensors were telling them. Open a channel to both fleets, Sarah commanded. It's time to announce ourselves. The communications array activated, broadcasting on frequencies that hadn't been used for 3 centuries. When Sarah spoke, her voice carried across space with the weight of humanity's exile and their burning desire for justice. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation ship Horizon's End, flagship of the Sol Expeditionary Fleet. We have been monitoring this engagement. To the ships of the Grand Alliance, maintain your positions and prepare to coordinate a joint assault. To the Vorthan Empire, you have 30 seconds to begin withdrawing from this system before we open fire. The silence that followed was broken only by the electronic hum of ship systems and the quiet breathing of bridge crews who couldn't quite believe what they were witnessing. Then came Gexfall's response, transmitted on open channels for all to hear. Impossible. The humans are extinct. This is some elaborate deception. Sarah had been waiting 300 years to have this conversation. When she replied, her voice carried the accumulated anger of countless generations who had lived and died in exile, dreaming of the day when humanity would return to the galaxy that had cast them out. Supreme War Master Gexfall of the Vorthan Empire, this is Admiral Chen. Your people may have forgotten us, but we have never forgotten you. Humanity is very much alive, and we've been waiting a very long time for this conversation. Your 30 seconds are now 25 and counting. Around her, the bridge crew prepared for what they all knew would be the most important battle in human history. Not just because it would determine the fate of the galaxy, but because it would announce humanity's return to the cosmic stage in terms that no one could ignore. Weapons status, she asked quietly. All primary systems online, reported Commander James Rodriguez from the weapons station. Quantum disruptors are charged and ready. Temporal lances are synchronized. Reality scramblers are standing by. The Infinity Cannon is prepared for deployment on your order. The Infinity Cannon. Even among humanity's impossible weapons, it stood apart. A device that could reach into parallel dimensions and fire possibilities themselves, alternative timelines where the target had already been destroyed. It was the kind of weapon that could end not just a ship or a fleet, but an entire species' potential for existence. They wouldn't use it unless they had to. But the Vorthans didn't need to know that. Signal the Alliance fleet. Provide them with our tactical frequencies and coordinate joint targeting solutions. After 300 years, it's time for humanity to remember how to make friends. The response from Admiral Kexthera came almost immediately. Admiral Chen, this is Admiral Kexthera of the Grand Alliance fleet. We are honored by your intervention, though I confess we have many questions about how this is possible. Questions can wait until after the battle, Admiral. Right now, I need you to adjust your formations to account for dimensional displacement effects. Our weapons operate on principles that may seem unusual, and we don't want any friendly fire incidents. Dimensional displacement? Admiral, what exactly are we dealing with? Sarah smiled grimly. Admiral Kexthera, you're dealing with a species that has spent 3 centuries learning to be very, very angry. Stand by for combat coordination data. The countdown reached 15 seconds. On the sensor displays, she could see Vorthan ships beginning to adjust their formations, trying to account for this impossible new factor. Some were turning to target the human fleet, others maintaining their focus on the Alliance forces. Confusion was spreading through their perfect formations like cracks in crystal. 10 seconds, Admiral, Webb reported. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Today, we return to the galaxy as its protectors rather than its conquerors. Today, we show the universe what humanity became during our exile. Today, we remind the Vorthan Empire why they should have made sure we were actually extinct before they celebrated their victory. 5 seconds. All ships, you are cleared to engage. Show them what 300 years of evolution looks like. Show them why humanity never stays down. Show them why they should have left us alone. The timer reached 0. Space erupted in violence that transcended the merely physical. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that bent reality, twisted time, and made the fundamental forces of physics into tools of war. Energy beams that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously tore through Vorthan shields like tissue paper. Missiles that phased in and out of existence struck targets that thought they were safely behind cover. Gravity itself became a weapon as human ships manipulated mass and space to crush enemy vessels like paper. But the most devastating weapon was the simplest, the sight of humanity's return to the stars. Across the Alliance fleet, crews who had resigned themselves to glorious defeat suddenly found themselves fighting alongside legends returned from the dead. Morale soared, coordination improved, and desperate last stands became aggressive advances. The Vorthan Empire, which had never known defeat, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that had learned to weaponize impossibility itself. Their perfect formations crumbled as ships tried to target enemies that existed in multiple dimensions. Their overwhelming numerical advantage meant nothing against foes who could step outside normal spacetime to attack from angles that shouldn't exist. Admiral Saracen watched the battle unfold and felt a satisfaction that had been building for 3 centuries. The exile was over. Humanity had returned to the stars. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The first salvo from the human fleet defied every law of physics that Supreme War Master Gexball thought he understood. His flagship, the Eternal Dominance, shuddered as reality itself seemed to twist around him. The weapons readings his sensors were providing couldn't be accurate energy signatures that existed in impossible spectrums, projectiles that appeared to be traveling faster than light while somehow arriving before they were fired, defensive fields that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. Damage report, he barked at his bridge crew, his cybernetic enhancements already analyzing battle data at superhuman speeds. "Sir, we're reading no actual damage to the hull," reported his tactical officer, a veteran of 50 campaigns who had never encountered anything like this. "But our shields are fluctuating in patterns that don't make sense. It's as if they're being tested rather than attacked." Gexfall's enhanced mind processed this information with calculating precision. A test. The humans weren't trying to destroy his flagship with their first shots, they were probing, learning, demonstrating their capabilities. It was a psychological tactic as much as a military one, and, despite 3 centuries of cybernetic enhancement, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. "What's the status of the 7th Battle Group?" His communications officer worked frantically at her console before responding with barely controlled panic. "Sir, the 7th Battle Group is gone." "Define gone." "They appear to have been displaced from normal spacetime. Our sensors show their last position as a region of twisted space that our instruments can't properly analyze. It's as if they simply stopped existing in our reality." 3 entire squadrons of Vorthan warships, over 200 vessels, had been erased from existence in a matter of seconds. Not destroyed in the conventional sense, but removed from the battlefield in a way that Gexball's enhanced intellect struggled to comprehend. Around him, the bridge crew worked with the mechanical efficiency that Vorthan genetic and cybernetic modifications provided, but he could sense the undercurrent of confusion and fear that even their conditioning couldn't completely suppress. The Empire had built its military doctrine on absolute technological superiority. Every enemy they had ever faced used variations of the same basic principles: energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, defensive shields, faster than light travel. The differences were matters of degree, not fundamental understanding. These humans were operating on principles that seemed to treat the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules. Analysis of their weapon signatures? Chief Scientist Kreltok, whose biomechanical brain was capable of processing combat data in real time, provided his report with characteristic Vorthan precision. "Preliminary analysis suggests they're manipulating fundamental forces we don't fully understand. Some of their weapons appear to be firing compressed gravity. Others seem to be weaponizing temporal distortion. Still others." He paused, an unusual behavior for his enhanced cognitive systems. "Still others appear to be shooting crystallized space itself." "That's impossible." "Yes, sir. Yet they're doing it anyway." Gexfall turned his attention back to the tactical display, where the battle was developing in ways that challenged his understanding of warfare itself. The Grand Alliance fleet, which had been preparing for a desperate last stand, was now advancing aggressively in coordination with the human vessels. Their morale boost was visible in their improved coordination and increasingly bold tactical maneuvers. But it was the human ships themselves that commanded his attention. They moved through space like living things, their hulls seeming to shift and flow as they maneuvered. Some appeared to phase in and out of existence, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. Others grew additional weapon ports as the battle progressed, their ships literally adapting to combat conditions in real time. The largest of them, the vessel that had identified itself as the Horizon's End, was unlike anything in his considerable military experience. It was easily the size of a small moon, its hull covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Energy cascaded along its surface in colors that didn't exist in normal space, and weapon ports opened and closed like breathing orifices. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the human admiral." "Put it through." Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main screen, and Gexball studied her with the analytical precision his enhancements provided. Human, definitely, but there was something different about her eyes. They held depths that suggested she had seen things that existed beyond normal reality. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions his sensors couldn't detect. "War Master Gexball, I notice you haven't begun withdrawing your forces. I hope this doesn't mean you intend to escalate this engagement." "Admiral Chen." He kept his voice level, professional. "Your weapons are impressive. But surely you understand that retreat is not a concept that exists in Vorthan military doctrine." "Oh, I understand perfectly. Your species spent the last 300 years convincing themselves that you were the apex predators of this galaxy. You've grown accustomed to crushing anyone who opposes you through sheer technological and numerical superiority." Her expression shifted, and, for just a moment, Gexball glimpsed something that made his cybernetic systems trigger threat assessment warnings. "The problem with that approach, War Master, is that it only works until you encounter a predator higher up the food chain. Would you like a demonstration of what humanity learned during our exile?" Before Gexball could respond, the horizon's end opened a single weapon port near its bow. What emerged wasn't an energy beam or projectile, but rather a ripple in space itself that expanded outward like a wave in still water. When it reached the Vorthan heavy cruiser Inexorable Will, the ship simply folded. Reality bent around it until the massive vessel occupied a space no larger than a fighter craft, its entire existence compressed into a geometric impossibility that continued to function but now existed in a framework that violated every principle of engineering. The compressed cruiser continued to maneuver and fire its weapons, but at a scale that rendered it effectively harmless. It had become a curiosity rather than a threat, a demonstration of human capabilities that was somehow more terrifying than simple destruction. "Spatial compression technology," Admiral Chen explained casually, as if she were discussing the weather. "We learned it from beings that exist naturally in 12 dimensions. Quite useful for dealing with enemies who rely on size and mass for their advantages." "Reverse the effect immediately," Gexball demanded, though his enhanced tactical analysis was already telling him that such a demand was futile. "Oh, it's not permanent," Chen replied. "The effect will fade in approximately 73 years. Give or take a decade. Though I suppose the crew might find the experience somewhat disorienting." Around Gexball, his bridge crew maintained their posts with mechanical discipline, but he could sense the growing uncertainty in their biomechanical systems. The Empire had conditioned its people to expect victory through superior technology and training. Facing an enemy that treated impossible as merely inconvenient was causing stress fractures in their psychological conditioning. "Perhaps we could discuss terms," Admiral Chen continued. "I'm prepared to offer you a choice that your empire has never offered to its victims. The Vorthan Empire does not negotiate with inferior species." "Inferior?" Chen's laugh carried harmonics that seemed to exist in parallel dimensions. "War Master, we spent 300 years in exile learning from beings that your species can't even perceive. We've seen the birth and death of universes. We've walked through the spaces between realities and learned to speak languages that exist as pure mathematics. We become something that transcends the physical limitations your empire still operates under." As if to emphasize her point, several human ships suddenly occupied multiple positions simultaneously, their forms becoming quantum probability clouds that attacked from every possible angle at once. Vorthan vessels found themselves under fire from directions that didn't exist in three-dimensional space. "But," Jin continued, "we remember what it was like to be purely physical beings operating under the constraints of normal reality. We remember being proud, stubborn, and convinced of our own superiority. So I'm going to offer you something your empire has never offered its victims, a choice." "Explain." "Option 1, continue this engagement. My fleet will demonstrate the full extent of what humanity learned during our exile. Your forces will be systematically dismantled using technologies that will seem like magic to your scientists. Those of your people who survive will carry word back to your empire about what happens when you encounter a species that has evolved beyond your understanding. The tactical display showed human ships beginning to move in formation patterns that existed in more than 3 dimensions, their coordination suggesting a level of tactical communication that operated faster than light. Option 2. Order your fleets to withdraw from this system and all Alliance territory. In return, I'll provide you with a complete record of this engagement to take back to your empire. Your leadership can analyze our capabilities and decide whether they wish to continue this war against an alliance that now has humanity as its ally. And if the empire chooses to continue the war? Chen's expression grew serious. Then, we'll finish what your people started 300 years ago. But, this time, we won't be the ones who disappear. Gexval processed this information with the speed his cybernetic enhancements provided. His tactical analysis was clear: the human fleet possessed technological capabilities that were centuries beyond anything the Empire had encountered. Their weapons operated on principles that his scientists couldn't begin to understand, let alone counter. Their defensive capabilities made conventional attacks seem primitive and ineffective. From a purely military standpoint, withdrawal was the logical choice. Preserve his forces, gather intelligence, return to the Empire with data that would allow them to develop countermeasures. It was the textbook response to encountering superior enemy technology. But 300 years of Vorthan military doctrine had conditioned him to believe that superior enemy technology was a contradiction in terms. The Empire was supreme. The Empire was inevitable. The Empire did not retreat from inferior species, no matter what tricks they might deploy. The Vorthan Empire has never known defeat, he said finally. We will not begin learning that concept from extinct primitives who hide behind illusions and deception. Admiral Chen nodded slowly, as if she had expected this response. I understand, War Master. Pride is a difficult thing to surrender, especially when it's been the foundation of your entire civilization. Very well. All ships, you are cleared to demonstrate Level 2 capabilities. Let's show the Empire what 300 years of evolution looks like. The human fleet's response was immediate and devastating. Reality itself became a weapon as ships fired beams of crystallized time that aged enemy vessels into scrap metal in seconds. Gravity wells opened in the middle of Vorthan formations, crushing ships that had been designed to withstand the pressure at the heart of gas giants. Space itself began to fold and twist as human vessels manipulated the fundamental structure of existence. But, perhaps most terrifying was the way the human ships began to change during combat. Hull configurations shifted and flowed like liquid metal. New weapon systems grew from their surfaces like organic appendages. Some vessels split into multiple copies of themselves, each one as real and dangerous as the original. The Grand Alliance fleet, emboldened by their impossible allies, pressed their attack with renewed vigor. Korthak raiders darted between dimensions in the wake of human ships, emerging from quantum shadows to strike at Vorthan vessels that thought they were safely protected. Zelanti crystal ships began to sing in harmonies that resonated with human weapon frequencies, creating destructive interference patterns that tore through enemy hulls. Even the mysterious ethereal collective revealed new capabilities, their ghostly vessels becoming temporarily solid long enough to coordinate devastating alpha strikes with their human allies. Gexval watched his perfect formations crumble under assault from enemies that treated the laws of physics as polite suggestions. 3 centuries of military supremacy were being dismantled by beings who had learned to wage war with the fundamental forces of existence itself. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we've lost contact with 17 battle groups. Current estimates suggest we've suffered 40% casualties in the last 10 minutes. 40% casualties. Against an enemy that appeared to be holding back. For the first time in his enhanced existence, Supreme War Master Gexval of the Vorthan Empire began to consider the possibility that his forces might actually lose this engagement. Admiral Kexthera had commanded fleets in 17 major engagements during her career, but nothing had prepared her for fighting alongside beings who treated the impossible as routine. From her position on the bridge of the Alliance flagship Unified Resolve, she watched human vessels perform maneuvers that challenged her understanding of physics, biology, and military tactics simultaneously. Admiral, Commander Vashti reported, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and barely controlled excitement, the human vessel Prometheus is sharing targeting data for what they're calling a reality cascade strike. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but they're requesting we coordinate our quantum torpedoes with their temporal displacement beams. Kexthera studied the tactical data flowing across her command displays. The human ships were providing real-time analysis of Vorthan weak points that her own sensors couldn't detect, vulnerabilities that existed in dimensions her people hadn't even known existed. Working with technology this advanced was like being a child asked to assist master craftsmen, but the results spoke for themselves. In the 20 minutes since the human fleet had revealed itself, the tide of battle had shifted so dramatically that what had begun as the Alliance's last stand was rapidly becoming a rout of the seemingly invincible Vorthan Empire. Coordinate as requested, she ordered. If Admiral Chen's people can turn our quantum torpedoes into weapons that work in 17 dimensions, I'm not going to question the science. Around her, the bridge crew worked with an energy and hope she hadn't seen since the early days of the war. Her own people, the pragmatic Korthak, were known for their ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances, but even they were struggling to keep up with the pace of tactical evolution the humans were demonstrating. Admiral, incoming transmission from Admiral Chen, reported Communications Officer Rolten. Put her through. The main screen shifted to show Admiral Chen's face. The human woman appeared calm despite coordinating what was arguably the most complex naval engagement in galactic history. Behind her, Kexthera could see bridge displays showing tactical information that seemed to exist in mathematical dimensions she couldn't comprehend. Admiral Kexthera, I wanted to personally thank you and your fleet for the coordination. Your people are adapting to our tactical methods faster than we had projected. Admiral Chen, I have to ask, where did your people learn to fight like this? These technologies, these tactics, they're unlike anything in our databases. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. 300 years ago, when your ancestors were developing interstellar travel, my people were driven from their home and forced to survive in places that exist between realities. We encountered beings and phenomena that most species would consider mythological. We learned from entities that exist as pure energy, from hive minds that span multiple galaxies, from artificial intelligences that have been planning for millions of years. She paused, and, for a moment, Kexthera glimpsed something in the human's eyes that suggested depths of experience no mortal being should possess. But, mostly, we learned from necessity. When your survival depends on understanding forces that can unmake reality with a thought, you develop new definitions of what's possible. And, now you've returned to help us? We've returned to finish something that started 3 centuries ago. The Vorthan Empire made the mistake of assuming that destroying our worlds meant destroying our people. They celebrated their victory and moved on to other conquests, never bothering to confirm that humanity was actually extinct. Chen's image shifted slightly, and Kexthera realized that the human admiral was somehow communicating with her from multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. The Empire has spent 300 years conquering this galaxy through fear and superior technology. They've crushed dozens of species, enslaved countless worlds, and convinced themselves that they represent the inevitable future of galactic civilization. Today, we're going to demonstrate why you should never assume your enemy is dead until you've seen the body. The transmission ended, and Kexthera found herself staring at tactical displays that showed the systematic dismantling of the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. Human weapons were operating on principles that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics in real time. Vorthan ships that had been untouchable just hours ago were being neutralized by technologies that treated their advanced armor and shields as minor inconveniences. Admiral, we're receiving priority communications from multiple alliance governments, Vashti reported. They're demanding to know how we made contact with a human fleet. Apparently, several species have standing orders to establish immediate diplomatic relations with any surviving Terran Federation elements. That was understandable. In the 3 centuries since humanity's apparent extinction, they had become something of a legend among the surviving species. Stories of human ingenuity, adaptability, and absolute refusal to surrender had become part of galactic folklore. Every species that had encountered them before their disappearance had tales of impossible victories, desperate innovations, and a stubborn insistence on finding solutions where none existed. Tell the Alliance Council that Admiral Chen and her people will undoubtedly want to establish formal diplomatic contact once this engagement is concluded. For now, our priority is working with them to eliminate the Vorthan threat. The battle continued to evolve in ways that challenged everything Kexthera thought she knew about space combat. Human vessels were coordinating with Alliance ships to create attack patterns that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their weapons were adapting to Vorthan countermeasures faster than the Empire's computers could process defensive responses. Some human ships were even demonstrating the ability to exist in multiple locations at once, attacking from several vectors while maintaining perfect coordination. But, perhaps most impressive was how they fought alongside the Alliance forces. Despite possessing technology that could have easily won this battle single-handedly, the humans were deliberately including their allies in every major tactical decision. They were sharing targeting data, coordinating combined strikes, and ensuring that Alliance vessels remained active participants rather than mere observers. It was a level of respect and cooperation that the Vorthan Empire had never shown anyone. "Admiral," called out Lieutenant Yekstar from the sensor station, "I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the human flagship. Whatever they're preparing to do, it's requiring power levels that should theoretically tear their ship apart." On the tactical display, the horizon's end was indeed gathering energies that defied measurement. Space around the massive vessel was beginning to distort as forces that existed beyond normal physics were brought to bear. The visual effect was stunning. Reality itself seemed to be gathering around the ship like a storm made of pure possibility. "They're opening a communication channel to the entire battlefield," Rolten announced. "Both fleets are receiving this." Admiral Chen's voice echoed across space, reaching every ship in both fleets with crystal clarity despite the massive electromagnetic interference from the ongoing battle. "This is Admiral Chen to all vessels. The Vorthan Empire has been given multiple opportunities to withdraw their forces and avoid unnecessary casualties. They have chosen to continue this engagement despite clear evidence of their disadvantage. As such, we are now authorized to demonstrate capabilities that we had hoped to keep in reserve." The energy readings from the horizon's end spiked beyond the ability of Alliance sensors to measure. All Alliance ships are directed to withdraw to minimum safe distance immediately. "What you are about to witness represents the application of technologies that we developed specifically for dealing with enemies who refuse to acknowledge defeat." Kexthera didn't need to be told twice. "All Alliance vessels, emergency withdrawal to coordinate 77 Mark IV. Maximum acceleration. Whatever the humans are about to do, we don't want to be anywhere near it." As Alliance ships scrambled to reach safe distance, the human fleet began to move in formation patterns that shouldn't have been possible. Their vessels arranged themselves in geometric configurations that existed in more than 3 dimensions, creating tactical structures that looked like living mathematics. "Admiral Chen to War Master Gexval," the transmission continued. "You have insisted that the Vorthan Empire never retreats, never negotiates, and never acknowledges the superiority of other species. We respect your commitment to those principles, even as we demonstrate why they may be poorly suited to your continued existence." The horizon's end had become the center of what could only be described as a reality storm. Space and time were bending around it in patterns that hurt to observe directly. Energy cascaded along its hull in colors that didn't exist in normal light spectra. "What you are about to experience is what we call a possibility engine. It doesn't destroy targets in the conventional sense. Instead, it calculates all possible futures for a given enemy fleet and selects the timeline where that fleet suffers total defeat. It then makes that timeline become reality." The weapon that emerged from the horizon's end wasn't a beam or projectile, but rather a wave of crystallized potential that expanded outward at speeds that made light seem stationary. When it reached the Vorthan fleet, the effect was immediate and absolute. Ships that had been maneuvering aggressively suddenly found themselves drifting powerless. Weapons that had been charging simply failed to fire. Defensive systems shut down not because they had been damaged, but because in the timeline that was now becoming real, they had never been activated in the first place. Entire squadrons of Vorthan vessels discovered that their navigation computers had plotted courses that led them directly into each other's firing solutions. Missiles that had been programmed to seek Alliance targets instead locked onto Vorthan ships, as if their guidance systems had been designed by enemy saboteurs. It wasn't just that the Vorthan fleet was losing, it was as if the universe itself had been edited to ensure their defeat. The effect is temporary, Admiral Chen's voice continued calmly as the Vorthan Empire's greatest fleet systematically destroyed itself through a series of impossible coincidences and equipment failures. Your ships and crews will return to normal in approximately 6 hours. However, they will do so as prisoners of the Alliance forces they attempted to conquer. Across the battlefield, Vorthan vessels were surrendering or simply shutting down as their crews realized that they were trapped in a reality where victory had become mathematically impossible. Warmaster Gexfal's flagship was still functional, but it was surrounded by human ships that existed in so many dimensions simultaneously that conventional targeting was meaningless. The choice I offered you earlier still stands, Warmaster, Chen concluded. You can provide your empire with complete records of this engagement and recommend they reconsider their expansion plans. Or we can continue this demonstration using capabilities that we haven't revealed yet. For the first time in the war, Kexthera heard something in a Vorthan transmission that she had never expected: uncertainty. Admiral Chen, Gexfal's voice carried across the battlefield, I require clarification on the terms you are proposing. Admiral Chen's response carried the weight of 3 centuries of exile and the absolute confidence of a species that had learned to treat impossibility as a starting point rather than a limitation. The terms are simple, Warmaster. The war is over. The only question is whether it ends with negotiation or with the Vorthan Empire learning why humanity spent 300 years preparing for this moment. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching ships from 12 different species work together to build the galaxy's first truly integrated defense platform. The massive structure existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, incorporating human technology with the best engineering principles the Alliance had to offer. It was beautiful, impossible, and absolutely necessary. The Vorthan delegation has arrived, Captain Webb informed her, his voice carrying the mixture of satisfaction and wariness that had become common when discussing their former enemies. Empress Valandra herself is aboard their flagship, along with their complete scientific council and what appears to be every military leader who survived the Reformation. Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving the construction work outside. In the months since humanity's return to the galactic stage, everything had changed. The Vorthan Empire had undergone what their historians were calling the Great Reformation, a complete restructuring of their government, military doctrine, and philosophical approach to interstellar relations. It was the kind of fundamental transformation that usually took centuries, but had been accomplished in half a year through necessity and overwhelming evidence that their previous approach was no longer viable. How are the integration protocols proceeding? Better than projected, actually. The Zelanti engineers have figured out how to harmonize their crystal resonance technology with our dimensional phase systems. The Thexmor have developed new alloys that can exist in multiple realities simultaneously. Even the Ethereal Collective has shared some of their intangibility techniques. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Alliance had been transformed as much as the Vorthan Empire, though in very different ways. Instead of being forced to abandon their principles, they had discovered new possibilities for cooperation and mutual advancement. Human dimensional technology was being integrated with alien innovations in ways that were producing results none of them could have achieved alone. And the former Vorthan territories? Free elections are proceeding on schedule across all liberated worlds. The transition governments report that local populations are adapting well to self-governance, though there have been some interesting developments. Such as? Webb's expression grew thoughtful. Several worlds have specifically requested human advisors to help them develop new governmental structures. Apparently, our reputation for impossible solutions to unsolvable problems has spread faster than our actual diplomatic corps. That was both gratifying and concerning. Sarah had been worried that humanity's return would create unrealistic expectations among species who had mythologized them during their 3-century absence. The reality was that while human technology and capabilities had advanced dramatically during their exile, they were still people dealing with complex political and social challenges that didn't have purely technological solutions. Speaking of diplomatic challenges, Webb continued, the Alliance Council has formally requested that humanity assume permanent leadership of the Unified Defense Force. They're offering us supreme command of all military assets in exchange for continued access to our defensive technologies. Sarah had been expecting this. The Battle of Kepler 442 had demonstrated that human capabilities were so far beyond anything else in the galaxy that traditional concepts of military alliance needed to be reconsidered. But, accepting supreme command would fundamentally change humanity's relationship with the rest of galactic civilization. What's the recommendation from the Council of Admirals? Split down the middle. Half think we should accept in order to ensure proper integration of our technologies with allied forces. The other half worry that it would create exactly the kind of technological dependency that made the Vorthan Empire so dangerous in the first place. The question had been debated extensively in the months since their return. Humanity now possessed technologies that could protect the galaxy from virtually any threat, but using those technologies responsibly required careful consideration of their long-term implications. Power that absolute could be just as corrupting for humans as it had been for the Vorthans. My recommendation, Sarah said finally, is that we accept advisory positions rather than supreme command. We share our technologies and tactical expertise, but we insist on collaborative leadership structures that prevent any single species from dominating galactic policy. Even if that species happens to be us and we're demonstrably more advanced than everyone else? Especially if that species happens to be us. The galaxy doesn't need another empire, even a benevolent one. It needs a true alliance where every species contributes according to their capabilities and has a voice in major decisions. Webb nodded approvingly. I'll convey that to the Council. I think most of them suspected that would be your position. The door to the observation deck opened, and Admiral Kextherai entered, her forearms carrying data tablets containing the latest reports from across Alliance space. In the months since the battle, the Korthak commander had become Sarah's closest collaborator in developing new integrated command structures. Admiral Chen, the preliminary results from the Vorthan Reformation are quite remarkable, she said without preamble, a habit Sarah had come to appreciate. Their society is adapting to cooperative principles faster than our sociologists predicted possible. How much of that is genuine transformation versus pragmatic adaptation to new circumstances? According to our intelligence analysts, approximately 67% appears to be genuine philosophical change. The remainder is tactical accommodation to the new galactic power structure. However, even the tactical accommodations are becoming internalized as Vorthan society adapts to collaborative rather than dominance-based interactions. Sarah studied the data Kextherai provided. The Vorthan Empire's transformation was unprecedented in galactic history, an entire civilization abandoning principles that had defined them for millennia and adopting completely different approaches to technology, governance, and interstellar relations. It was the kind of change that should have taken generations, if it was possible at all. What about resistance elements? 3 minor factions have attempted to establish separatist movements in former imperial territory. All were peacefully contained by local populations who refused to support them. Apparently, the benefits of cooperative governance are becoming obvious enough that imperial nostalgia has limited appeal. That was encouraging, though Sarah remained cautious about declaring victory too early. Fundamental cultural change was a complex process, and there were probably elements within Vorthan society that were still trying to find ways to restore their former dominance. Admiral, Webb interrupted, we're receiving a priority transmission from the approaching Vorthan delegation. Empress Velandra is requesting permission to board Unity Station for the formal treaty negotiations. Permission granted. Full ceremonial honors for a head of state. And, Webb, make sure our people understand that the Empress is here as an equal partner in galactic governance, not as a defeated enemy seeking terms. The next several hours would determine the future structure of galactic civilization. The treaty being negotiated would establish frameworks for cooperation, technology sharing, and mutual defense that would define interstellar relations for generations to come. Get it right, and they could create a truly stable galactic community. Get it wrong, and they might simply be creating the conditions for future conflicts. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in Unity Station's main conference chamber, seated across from beings who represented every major civilization in the galaxy. Empress Velandra sat directly across from her, the Vorthan leader having undergone her own transformation during the Reformation. The cybernetic enhancements that had once made her appear more machine than biological being had been replaced with organic equivalents that enhanced her capabilities without sacrificing her essential nature. Admiral Chen, the Empress began, I want to personally express the gratitude of the Vorthan people for your restraint during our adjustment period. Your people could have demanded unconditional surrender and complete subjugation. Instead, you offered us the opportunity to transform ourselves and become contributing members of galactic society. Your Majesty, Sarah replied, humanity learned long ago that forced compliance creates resentment and instability. True security comes from cooperation between equals, not dominance by superiors. Around the table, representatives from the Alliance species nodded approvingly. The principles being discussed represented a fundamental departure from traditional galactic politics, where technological advantage typically translated directly into political control. The treaty framework we're proposing, Admiral Kexthera announced, establishes 3 core principles. First, technological advancement belongs to the entire galactic community, with each species contributing according to their capabilities. Second, political decisions affecting multiple species require consensus among all affected parties. Third, military forces exist to protect the community as a whole, not to advance the interests of individual species. It was an ambitious framework, perhaps impossibly idealistic. But, then, Sarah reflected, humanity had gotten quite good at making the impossible work. The Vorthan Empire formally accepts these principles, Empress Valandra declared. Our military forces will be integrated into the unified defense structure under collaborative command. Our technological resources will be shared for the benefit of all species. Our political system will be restructured to support consensus-based decision-making. One by one, the other species added their formal acceptance. The Zelanti Confederacy, whose crystal ships would now sing in harmony with human dimensional resonators. The Thexmore Republic, whose massive industrial capacity would be directed toward building stations like Unity rather than weapons of conquest. The mysterious Ethereal Collective, who had finally agreed to share some of their reality manipulation techniques in exchange for human insights into dimensional physics. Then, it's unanimous, Sarah declared. The Galactic Cooperative Alliance is formally established. We go forward together, as equals, building something that none of us could achieve alone. The signing ceremony that followed was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching billions of beings who were watching the birth of a new form of interstellar civilization. For 3 centuries, galactic politics had been defined by conquest, domination, and the rule of the technologically superior. Today, that changed. As Sarah affixed her signature to the treaty document, she thought about the journey that had brought humanity to this moment. 300 years of exile, of learning from beings that existed beyond normal reality, of developing technologies that transcended the limitations of conventional physics. All of it had led to this, the chance to help create a galaxy where cooperation replaced conquest and where every species could contribute to something greater than themselves. Admiral Empress Valandra said privately as the formal ceremonies concluded, I have one final question, if I may. During our exile, what was it that prevented humanity from becoming what the Vorthan Empire had been? You possessed power that could have dominated the galaxy even more completely than we had managed. What kept you from using it that way? Sarah considered the question carefully. It was something she had thought about often during the long years of exile, especially when they had first developed technologies that could have easily conquered any known civilization. I think, she said finally, it was because we never forgot what it felt like to lose everything. We knew what it was like to watch our worlds burn and our people scattered to the void. We remembered being helpless against a superior enemy. That memory taught us that power without restraint eventually creates enemies that will find ways to destroy you. She paused, watching through the conference chamber's windows as ships from 12 species worked together to continue building Unity Station. But, more than that, we learned that the universe is vast and strange and full of wonders that no single species can fully understand. Working alone, we might have become powerful enough to dominate the galaxy. Working with others, we became something better than powerful. We became wise. Outside, space itself continued to bend and flow as human technology merged with alien innovation to create structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It was beautiful, impossible, and absolutely necessary. Just like the civilization they were building together. The war was over. The galaxy was free. And humanity had finally come home, not to the worlds they had lost, but to the community they had always been meant to be part of. The silence that had once swept the battlefield had become something far more precious, the peace that comes when former enemies choose to become allies, and, when the impossible becomes inevitable through the simple act of working together towards something better than anyone had thought possible. In the depths of space, the combined fleets of the Galactic Cooperative Alliance stood ready to defend their new civilization against any threat the universe might produce. They were different species with different capabilities, different perspectives, and different dreams. But they faced the unknown together, and that made all the difference.